I didn't expect to be erased at my own husband's funeral, but when my son thanked another woman for being our true family. The room clapped while my name died quietly in the corner. The lilies smelled like apologies no one planned to make. The stained glass windows at St. Matthew's threw polite colors over faces that wouldn't look at me. I sat 2 pews back, knees together, hands on a purse that suddenly felt like a flotation device on a sinking cruise. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I spent 40 years polishing Thomas Whitaker's life until the brass shone and my fingerprints disappeared. Marcus, my only child, stood straight at the podium. The way he used to stand against me when he was small and the ocean got loud. Sharp suit, steady voice, that calm engineer tone that could sell a server outage as a feature. He read the eulogy, cleared his throat, and then, "There's someone I want to thank in a special way." I braced for my mother. What came was a careful bullet to the heart. Ms. Dana Caldwell, who stood by my father through his hardest years. Chairs squeaked, whispers fizzed like soda. Dana rose from the front row, tailored emerald coat, perfect hair, practiced grief. A few people nodded at her like she was the one who'd earned the casserole train. I stared at the hymn number board as if it might change to 911. When the last "Amen" folded shut, the lawyer scheduled the will reading. I told myself dignity is just endurance with lipstick. At the firm, a portrait of the Liberty Bell watched us as if freedom were a punchline. The attorney read in a voice built for bad news, the primary residence in Philadelphia. The Cape May cottage, the investment accounts, to Ms. Dana Caldwell. My name, the legal wife, was a ghost that couldn't clear security. I turned to Marcus. His hands were laced, jaw set, no surprise. Only compliance. "You knew," I whispered. He nodded once, like confirming a software patch. Dad had his reasons. If Thomas had reasons, I was going to find them, paper reasons. Money reasons, the kind that don't lie under oath. I went home and opened the closet that still smelled like Tom's cologne, citrus and denial. Starched shirts lined up like alibis. I pulled down boxes, ledgers, party photos, a program from a symphony I never attended. My reflection in the dresser mirror looked like a woman auditioning for the role of widow number 3, dignified. Across the street, Mrs. Halpern watered her roses as if grief were just a thirsty plant. "Evelyn, dear," she said when I wandered over. "Tom used to hang those Christmas lights with that consultant of his. What was her name again?" I swallowed a laugh that sounded like a cough. "Dana." Yes, Dana. Nice posture. I didn't know posture could steal a house. But here we were, back at the kitchen table. I opened my old laptop, the one I used to balance budgets when Tom decided my salary was optional. If marriage is a ledger, mine had too many incollectibles. I searched public records like a woman looking for her pulse. There it was, a single-family home in Dana's name near Fairmount. Purchased 5 years ago, right when Tom chaired a workforce housing pilot. The spreadsheet in my head lit up like a Christmas confession. I called Ruth Lanier, my former colleague who still kept access to ghosts in archived servers. "Ruth," I said, "I think Tom funneled company funds to a shell for Dana. I need eyes on the old project ledgers." Ruth didn't gasp, she never wastes oxygen. "Forward what you have, I'll dig." 10 minutes later, I sent links, screenshots, the kind of Facebook photos people post when they forget privacy is a setting. Not a personality trait. Tom in Dana's kitchen. Tom in Dana's garden. Tom toasting a life I wasn't invited to. My phone buzzed. "Marcus." I exhaled hope and answered. "Mom, you sent Dana a legal notice? That's cruel." I stared at the chipped mug in my hand. The one that had survived 3 moves and a teenager with elbows. "What's cruel," I said, "is rewriting family without telling the author." He sighed. Dad was happy with her. The old ache rose, but I didn't feed it. Then we'll test his happiness against the law. By morning, Ruth would send the first files, and I would learn just how expensive happiness had been. The email arrived with the sunrise like a polite burglar. Subject: 3 payments, Quinty Consulting LLC. Ruth's notes in yellow highlights: no office. Staggered transfers, audit cycle timing, totals that made my heartbeat count in 6 figures. I printed everything, slid the papers into a folder labeled Truth, because labels help when the world won't. Then I called Michelle Robinson, a fraud attorney with a reputation for turning, allegedly, into, actually. Her paralegal voice asked for details, my voice delivered them like invoices. Michelle took the call herself by minute 6. Send me everything, she said, warmth wrapped around steel. And Evelyn, eat something. At lunch, I met Marcus at the cafe that still sells the caramel squares he used to wear on his cheeks. He placed his phone face down like a timer on our love. Suing Dana Dishonors dad, I slid a photo across the table. Marcus at 10. Asleep with an inhaler, me beside him with hair that didn't care about fashion. Only breath. Honor isn't silence, I said. He looked, then away. The door chimed. Rain tapped the window like someone practicing confession. That afternoon, Michelle's office took my folder. The city outside reflected in the glass walls, Philadelphia pretending to be invincible. Michelle skimmed, nodding the way surgeons nod before they cut. There's a case here, she said. It won't be pretty. Pretty left at the funeral. I said. She cracked a smile. Good. You'll need that spine. Night folded over the Cape May cottage photo on my mantel, blue door. Crooked shell wreath. The lie of forever. I lit a candle, turned on a vinyl from 1978. And let the saxophone draw a straight line through my crooked day. I wasn't Tom's shadow anymore. I was my own headline. The first court date came quicker than grief, and Dana arrived with invoices so clean you could cut your finger on the edges. The courthouse smelled like waxed floors and old arguments. The first hearing landed on my calendar faster than casseroles on a widow's porch. I wore my navy suit, buttoned all the way. Armor disguised as fabric. Dana walked in with the confidence of a woman who never bought her own groceries. Her emerald coat had been replaced by a cream blazer so sharp it could slice bread. She carried a folder of invoices, stacked neatly like Holy Scripture. Her lawyer, a man with too much hairspray and too little conscience, announced, "These documents prove Ms. Caldwell's consulting services were legitimate." He said, legitimate, the way a magician says, abracadabra. The judge raised an eyebrow that could cut through marble. Michelle Robinson, my attorney, leaned close and whispered, "Don't flinch. Those invoices are cleaner than a preacher's shoes. But they're fake." When the judge asked for cross-examination, Michelle stood, calm as a librarian but sharp as a guillotine. She held up Ruth's highlighted spreadsheets. "Your Honor, these transfers happened in off-audit months. No office address is listed. The supposed company, Quinty Consulting, has no employees." She paused for effect. Unless Dana Caldwell staffed the entire firm with her reflection. The gallery chuckled, low and dangerous. Dana shifted in her chair, cheeks blotching under the foundation. I sat still, hands folded, remembering the nights I'd sat in hospital waiting rooms while Tom underwent checkups. Whispering prayers no one but the vending machine heard. And here was Dana, monetizing loyalty with forged receipts. Marcus sat behind her, my son. His expression was carved stone. Neither for me nor against me, just elsewhere. That hurt worse than any betrayal. The judge tapped her pen. Eyes steady. "We'll need further documentation," she said. "Until then, Ms. Caldwell's invoices are not sufficient evidence." Michelle slipped me a note that read, "Round 1 goes to us." I almost smiled. Almost. But battles aren't won in round 1, and the next move Dana made would drag Marcus deeper into her corner. The following week, Dana unveiled her next trick, Marcus. She brought him into the hallway before the session like a prized witness. I saw my son, my little boy who once couldn't sleep without his toy astronaut, standing at her side in a trench coat. Nodding like he'd rehearsed his lines. "Your Honor," Dana's lawyer declared inside the courtroom, "we will call Marcus Carter to testify regarding his father's wishes." My stomach flipped. Marcus rose, walked to the stand, and swore an oath as if loyalty were just a line you repeat. He spoke in that calm engineer tone. The one that made even bad news sound like a software update. My father often said Dana was the one who truly supported him. He wanted her to be secure. His eyes flicked toward me. But only briefly, like I was a pop-up window he couldn't close fast enough. Michelle leaned in and whispered, "He's parroting her script. Don't panic." But I did panic. Inside, memories crashed through me. Marcus wheezing through an asthma attack at age 7. Me crouched by his bed, stroking his hair until the medicine worked. The teen who came home with a bloody lip after bullies cornered him. And me storming the principal's office like a general. The boy who whispered, "Mom, don't leave me," after his first heartbreak. That boy was still there, wasn't he? Or had Dana managed to edit me out of even his memory? Michelle stood for cross. "Mr. Carter, are you aware these payments to Quinty Consulting were routed during times when your father's company was under investigation for budget discrepancies?" Marcus hesitated. "I don't know. I only know what Dad told me." And that was? That Dana understood him, that she respected him, that she made him happy. A silence filled the courtroom thick as honey. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted iron. Michelle closed her folder. No further questions. When Marcus stepped down, Dana patted his arm like she'd just claimed him in front of everyone. I gripped my folder marked truth. Nails digging into cardboard. If Dana thought she had won my son, she hadn't counted on the one thing stronger than her forged invoices, 40 years of my memories armed with proof. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with every lamp burning like a battlefield lit by halogen. Papers spread out in front of me, bank transfers, Ruth's screenshots, and a timeline I had scribbled across 3 sheets of legal pad. It looked like a crime scene. Which, in a way, it was. I stared at Marcus's face in an old photo propped against the sugar jar, his gap-toothed smile after losing his first baby tooth. That little boy didn't belong to Dana. He belonged to me, and if my grown son couldn't remember, I'd remind him, with evidence that even a courtroom couldn't ignore. Ruth called. I pulled another thread, she said, excitement crackling in her voice. One of the transfers was followed by a down payment on Dana's Cape May cottage. Records show the funds originated from a company account Tom had no authority to access personally. I closed my eyes. That's theft, Ruth. It's fraud, she corrected, and judges don't like fraud. By morning, Michelle had the documents printed, stamped, and color-coded like a general laying out troop positions. This, she said, slapping the top page, is the nail in her mahogany coffin. The next court session crackled with tension. Dana sat rigid, her cream blazer traded for navy as if color could manufacture credibility. Marcus sat behind her again, his jaw tight, refusing to meet my eyes. Michelle stood, voice crisp. "Your Honor, we present new evidence, company funds diverted into a private property purchase under Ms. Caldwell's name." She held up the deed like a magician revealing the real rabbit. Dana's lawyer sputtered, "Objection," but the judge overruled. Eyes narrowing. For the first time, Dana's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. And for the first time, Marcus glanced at me, not long. Not apologetic, but long enough to register something, doubt. I inhaled slowly. The tide had shifted. But battles aren't just fought on paper. Dana still had one weapon left, my son's loyalty, and she wasn't afraid to use it. The following morning, my phone buzzed before dawn. Marcus. For a heartbeat, I thought it might be an apology. Some glimmer of the boy who once ran to me after nightmares. Instead, his voice was flat. "Mom, can you stop this? You're humiliating Dad's memory." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "Marcus, your father humiliated me for decades. And now Dana's trying to take what isn't hers. She was there for him. He insisted. You never understood him like she did." I laughed, sharp and bitter. I understood his cholesterol numbers, his tax returns, his fear of thunderstorms, his ridiculous habit of hiding licorice in the sock drawer. Don't you dare tell me I didn't understand. Silence. Then he muttered, "She said you'd react like this." Ah, there it was. Dana had planted her seeds deep. That afternoon in court, Dana's attorney unveiled their counterstrike, a letter, supposedly handwritten by Tom, claiming he wanted Dana to inherit everything as a token of love and gratitude. Michelle examined it, lips curving. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "this letter is dated July 14th. But Mr. Whitaker was in hospital for knee surgery that entire week. According to medical records, he was on morphine." The courtroom buzzed. The judge leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" Michelle held up the hospital log. Signed by attending physicians. Mr. Whitaker couldn't have signed anything more binding than a breakfast order. Dana's lawyer deflated like a balloon in August. I looked at Marcus. His jaw worked. His eyes darted between the forged letter and me. A crack in the wall. Small, but there. The letter had failed. But Dana wasn't done, and her next move would strike where it hurt most, my history with Tom. Dana's lawyer shuffled papers, then cleared his throat. Your Honor, while questions may exist about the letter, we would like to submit testimony regarding Mrs. Carter's behavior during the marriage. I stiffened. Here it came, the smear campaign. Dana crossed her legs slowly, like a queen granting an audience. Tom confided in me, she said, her voice trembling just enough to seem rehearsed. He felt Evelyn was distant, critical, that she didn't respect him as a man. He told me she gave up her career, but then resented him for it. I wanted to leap across the aisle, but Michelle pressed my wrist down. Not yet. The judge tilted her head. Mrs. Carter, do you wish to respond? I stood. My knees wobbled, but my voice came out clear. Respect? I respected Tom so much I sold my mother's emerald ring to pay Marcus's tuition when Tom's investments went south. I respected him enough to manage his books when he said numbers gave him headaches. And when he asked me to quit my career, I believed it was love. That's not resentment, Your Honor, that's sacrifice. And it turns out he spent that sacrifice like pocket change on someone else. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Dana's smile faltered. Michelle rose beside me, driving the point home. Your Honor, women like Mrs. Carter are often rewritten as bitter or cold when in reality they are pillars holding up the very homes men like Mr. Whitaker pretended to build. Dana Caldwell wasn't supporting him, she was siphoning from him. And from his company. The judge's pen scratched notes. Her face unreadable. Marcus shifted in his seat, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. I knew that posture, it was the same one he had at age 15. When caught sneaking in past curfew. He wasn't proud of what he was hearing. I sat down, my pulse still hammering. For the first time in weeks, I felt taller. But the trial wasn't just about evidence, it was about endurance. And Dana was about to drag me into the longest round of my life. The trial stretched into weeks. Each day felt like a marathon run in heels, every step painful. Every breath calculated. Dana's lawyer tried every trick in the dusty book, motions to dismiss, objections over commas, even insinuating that my memory was colored by grief. Michelle never blinked. Counsel, she'd reply, voice crisp. If grief alone invalidated testimony, there wouldn't be a single widow with a voice in this country. The gallery chuckled, and even the bailiff smirked once. Meanwhile, Dana performed her role with Broadway precision, dabbed eyes, trembling hands, little sighs whenever Marcus helped her with her coat. She played the grieving almost widow, and the sight of my son steadying her elbow made me bite the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. But every night, I returned home and built my arsenal. Ruth funneled me more files, emails from Tom's work account, project budgets with mysterious consultant fees, and one damning memo: ensure DC's cottage expenses remain off books. Handle through Quinty. I printed it twice, one copy for Michelle, one pinned to my fridge, right between Marcus's kindergarten drawing of a rocket and a coupon for orange juice. Proof that even rockets can fall. And juice spoils, but truth waits. By the third week, Michelle presented the memo in court. Dana's face drained of color. Her lawyer stammered about context. But the judge's gavel snapped the air. Enough. We will deliberate with the evidence provided. For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. Marcus caught my eye as the session ended. His stare lingered, not hostile, not warm, but unsettled, like a man watching a house collapse, realizing he might have been living in it too. The verdict was coming, and with it, the final fracture between Dana, Marcus, and me. The day of the verdict. The courthouse felt like it was holding its breath. Even the fluorescent lights hummed softer, as though they, too, were waiting for judgment. I wore the charcoal gray coat Tom had once called dignified. Today it wasn't for him, it was for me. A kind of armor stitched from years of endurance. Michelle stood beside me, papers tucked neatly in her briefcase. Her confidence a shield I leaned on without shame. Dana arrived in black silk, veil draped lightly as if she were auditioning for Widow, the sequel. Marcus followed a step behind, his jaw tight, his eyes forward, refusing to glance at me. My heart clenched anyway. The judge entered, robe flowing, gavel striking. Silence wrapped the room. This court has reviewed the evidence, including questionable invoices, suspicious transfers, and corroborating testimony. It is the opinion of this bench that funds from Whitaker and Associates were misappropriated for personal use, specifically benefiting Ms. Dana Caldwell. Dana stiffened. Her lawyer's pen froze mid-scribble. The judge continued, accordingly, Ms. Caldwell is ordered to repay the estate $1.1 million, inclusive of interest. Furthermore, the properties purchased with these funds are to be liquidated, proceeds returned to the estate. A murmur rolled through the gallery like thunder over flat land. I gripped the edge of the bench, feeling a surge of vindication rush through veins that had run cold for months. Dana's face was stone, but her hands twitched as if strangling invisible strings. She turned toward Marcus, seeking solidarity. He didn't meet her gaze. Michelle placed her hand lightly on mine. "We won," she whispered. I swallowed hard. Yes, we had won, but my victory had a hollow echo. Because as I looked across the room, my son was still miles away, standing on the wrong side of the battlefield. The gavel had fallen on Dana, but the verdict on Marcus, my only child, was still out. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like gulls at a boardwalk. Microphones thrust toward me, flashes cracking the air. "Mrs. Carter, how do you feel? Do you think justice was served? Any comment about Ms. Caldwell's downfall?" I tightened my coat and gave them what Tom always valued most, composure. "The truth has spoken," I said simply, then walked past the noise. Dana stormed out minutes later, sunglasses swallowing half her face, her lawyer trailing like a leashed dog. When one reporter shouted, "Ms. Caldwell, will you appeal?" she hissed. No comment, and shoved into a waiting car. For the first time, she didn't look untouchable. She looked small. Marcus emerged last. For a moment, he stood at the top of the courthouse steps, scanning the crowd until his eyes found me. He hesitated. My heart leapt. But then he shoved his hands into his pockets and walked the opposite direction. No words, no glance back. That night, the house was too quiet. I poured a glass of water and sat in the living room where Tom's recliner still loomed like an unwanted monument. The victory felt like winning a war only to realize the battlefield was littered with what I loved most. Michelle called. "Evelyn, you should be proud. Few women have the courage to go this far." "I am proud," I admitted, "but it doesn't fill the empty chair at my table." She paused. "Sometimes justice and healing don't arrive together. One has to wait for the other." Her words lingered long after the call ended. I stared at Marcus's childhood photo on the mantel, the boy in red swim trunks, squealing at the ocean waves. I whispered into the silence, "Where did you go, baby?" The only answer was the ticking of the clock, steady and merciless. I had beaten Dana in court, but the real battle was waiting at a cafe table, where Marcus agreed to see me one last time. The cafe smelled of burnt espresso and nostalgia. Same place Marcus used to beg for caramel squares, back when his feet dangled from the booth. Now he sat across from me in a tailored trench coat, posture stiff, phone face down on the table, a silent threat that he could walk out at any buzz. I folded my hands. "Thank you for meeting me." He didn't answer, just tapped his thumb once on the table. Finally, he said, "Why couldn't you just let Dad's memory rest? You made a spectacle." I leaned forward. "Marcus, your father made the spectacle. I only pulled back the curtain." His jaw clenched. "Dana doesn't deserve what you did to her." I almost laughed. Bitter and sharp. "She stole from your father's company. From our family. She wore my life like a dress she borrowed and never returned. Dad loved her," he snapped. "She respected him in ways you never did." The words sliced, but I swallowed the pain. I respected him enough to save his firm when it nearly collapsed. I respected him enough to sit by his hospital bed through pneumonia, when Dana was nowhere to be found. That's not disrespect, Marcus, that's marriage. He looked down at his coffee, swirling it like answers might appear in the foam. "You're too strong, Mom. Too hard on people. Too strong," I repeated softly. "That's what he told you, isn't it?" He didn't reply. His silence was confession enough. I pulled a faded photo from my purse, Marcus at 2 years old. clinging to my neck on the beach. Terrified of the waves, I slid it across the table. You didn't know much then. But you knew where safety was. His eyes flickered. For the first time, the mask cracked. I'm not asking you to hate your father. I whispered. I'm asking you not to erase your mother. The cafe buzzed around us. Cups clinking, lives moving. Between us, a silence as fragile as spun glass. I thought my words might reach him, but Dana had already left her fingerprints on his heart. And the next thing he said nearly shattered mine. Marcus set the photo down as if it burned his fingers. His voice was low, almost apologetic, but the words cut like barbed wire. Dad told me the happiest years of his life were with Dana. For a second, the clatter of dishes and hiss of the espresso machine faded. Like the whole cafe bowed its head at a funeral only I was attending. I forced my voice steady. The happiest years of his life were built on my sacrifices. He could only be that charming, elegant man because I kept the floor from collapsing under him. He shook his head. You always think love is sacrifice. Dad didn't need that kind of love. He needed someone who didn't criticize him all the time. I laughed. Bitter. Criticism? Marcus. That was me fighting for respect. Fighting for decency. You call it nagging, but I call it refusing to disappear. His shoulders tightened, eyes darting toward the door. You just don't get it. Dana made him feel needed. You made him feel small. I stared at him, at the boy who once begged me not to leave his bedside during asthma attacks. At the teenager whose broken heart I carried like it was my own. At the man now telling me my strength was a flaw. I slid the photo back into my purse. My voice calm but lined with steel. You're right, I was too strong, and starting today, I'll save that strength for myself. Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the finality in my tone. Before he could answer, I stood. My chair scraped loud against the tile. Turning heads. Outside, the rain had begun, drops drumming the pavement in a relentless rhythm. I let them hit my face, cold and cleansing, as I walked to my car. For the first time in years, I didn't cry, I didn't plead, I didn't explain, I just let the storm wash me clean. But storms don't end at cafe doors, because that night, I uncovered proof that Dana's betrayal went deeper than anyone imagined. That night, the house creaked like it was remembering things it would rather forget. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cold coffee and opened my laptop. Determined to dig deeper, Dana had played her hand in court. But I knew she was holding more cards. Her Facebook profile was still public, an arrogance I couldn't believe. I scrolled through albums of curated happiness. Dana smiling on a beach in Cape May. Dana planting roses in a garden I'd never been invited to. Dana at Christmas holding a pie. And then my heart stuttered, Tom beside her. In the wool jacket I had given him for our 25th anniversary. His hand rested on her shoulder. His smile unguarded in a way I hadn't seen in years. I clicked a video. Dana's voice chirped in the background. Marcus. Your dad should be proud of you. The camera panned, and there was my son. Still in college then, hair longer, face boyish. He laughed, shy, as Dana draped an arm around him. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just Tom she had courted. It was my family. The betrayal spread wider than I had feared. She hadn't stolen my husband, she had been grooming my son to accept her place all along. I called Ruth. My voice shook. She was in our lives longer than we thought. 15 years, maybe more. Ruth exhaled sharply. Then this isn't just an affair. It's a campaign. I saved every photo, every video, every caption dripping with false intimacy. A new folder on my desktop. Evidence, Phase 2. I leaned back, staring at the flickering candle on the counter. For decades, I danced to Tom's rhythm, believing my steps kept the family together. But tonight, I realized Dana had been writing her own choreography behind the curtain. The difference now? I wasn't afraid to take the stage. By morning, I would bring Ruth more than gossip. I would bring the blueprint of Dana's entire scheme. Morning sunlight cut through the blinds in sharp stripes. Like the world was already cross-examining me. I stuffed the flash drive into my purse and drove to Ruth's bungalow. A pale gray house that smelled of lemon polish and old victories. She opened the door in slippers. Hair pulled back, glasses perched on her nose. You look like a woman who didn't sleep, she said. I didn't, I admitted, setting the flash drive on her table. You need to see this. Over tea, we clicked through the files. Dana's photos, the Cape May property records, Tom's suspicious transfers, piece after piece forming a picture uglier than either of us expected. Ruth leaned closer, scrolling with a frown. She wasn't just his mistress. Ruth muttered. She positioned herself as a silent partner. Look, every major payout coincides with a corporate project Tom was running. He funneled bonuses into shell accounts, then turned them into property for her. I stared at the screen. So all those nights he said he was working late, he was building her future. Ruth nodded grimly. And Marcus, she made sure he was there for enough of it to normalize her presence. The words hollowed me out. Normalized. My son had been groomed not to see her as an intruder, but as family. Ruth clicked on one more spreadsheet. Evelyn, this line, $50,000 labeled outside consulting, was the same month you were recovering from knee surgery. My throat closed. I remembered lying in bed, painkillers numbing me while Tom claimed work was overwhelming. He had been funding Dana while I was struggling to walk. I gripped Ruth's hand. We have to expose every penny. Her eyes sharpened behind her glasses. Then buckle up, because once we show this in court, Dana's not just losing properties, she's losing her mask. I exhaled slowly. For the first time, I felt not just betrayed, but armed. And when I handed Michelle the new files, even she, a woman who had seen every kind of fraud, sat back and whispered, "My God, this runs deep." Michelle's office sat on the 20th floor of a glass tower downtown. The kind of building that pretends to touch heaven while billing you for parking on Earth. I carried the flash drive like it was a weapon. Because in truth, it was. Michelle met me in the conference room. Blazer crisp, coffee steaming beside her legal pad. She slid on her glasses, plugged in the drive, and began scrolling. Her silence was scarier than any outburst. Finally, she leaned back, exhaling through her nose. "My God," she said softly, "this runs deep." She pointed at the timeline Ruth had built. Here, 3 payments funneled through Quinty Consulting, all during audit-off cycles. And here, Dana's Cape May property purchased 2 weeks after the final transfer. She turned to me. "Evelyn, this isn't just infidelity, it's embezzlement. Your husband compromised corporate funds, and Dana benefited directly." I swallowed hard. "So what happens next?" Michelle tapped her pen. "We file a motion to expand discovery. These records will let us subpoena more documents, bank accounts, emails, maybe even Dana's personal tax returns." She thought she was clever hiding behind Tom's shadow. But shadows dissolve under courtroom light. A nervous laugh escaped me. "You almost sound like a preacher." She smirked. "Preacher, lawyer, it's all about making the jury believe in a resurrection. In this case, the resurrection of truth." Her assistant walked in with a tray of copies. Michelle slipped one thick stack across the table toward me. "Keep these safe. But remember, Evelyn, this isn't just about winning a case. It's about proving you weren't invisible. That your 40 years mattered." Her words hit harder than any gavel. For so long, I had lived like the wallpaper in my own marriage, always present. Never noticed. Now, with every file, every highlighted number, I was carving my name back into the story. But carving a name comes at a cost, and Dana was about to show just how viciously she fought when cornered. The next hearing opened with a storm already brewing. Dana swept into the courtroom in crimson, bold, theatrical, daring the world to call her guilty. Her lawyer carried a box thick with folders. And for a moment my stomach sank. Michelle leaned over. "Don't blink. Half of that box is for show." Dana's attorney strutted to the front. "Your Honor, we have new evidence suggesting Mrs. Carter herself benefited from the company's finances. If Ms. Caldwell is to be accused, then fairness demands Mrs. Carter's role be examined too." The room buzzed. My heart jolted into my throat. He pulled out documents, credit card statements, old transfers in my name. "Look here, Mrs. Carter received funds from Whitaker and Associates labeled consulting reimbursements. Tens of thousands of dollars." Gasps rippled. Dana's smirk was a dagger aimed right at me. Michelle rose, calm as a surgeon. "Your Honor, those so-called reimbursements were Evelyn Carter's legitimate salary when she was employed as a financial consultant at the firm. Payments stopped after she resigned. Unlike Ms. Caldwell's transfers, they coincided with payroll schedules and IRS filings. The only deception here is pretending there's a comparison. The judge's gaze sliced to Dana's table. Counsel, unless you have more than smoke and mirrors, I suggest you refrain from theatrics. Dana's smirk faltered, but not her fire. She leaned toward Marcus, whispering furiously, her hand gripping his wrist as though she owned even his pulse. I saw him flinch but not pull away. My hands tightened around my folder. This wasn't just a trial for assets anymore. It was a tug of war for my son's loyalty. And Dana had no qualms about drawing blood. The judge had cut through Dana's theatrics, but the next witness she called would drag Marcus deeper into the fire. And I wasn't sure he'd come back out. The clerk called his name. Marcus Carter, please take the stand. My breath caught. I wanted to shield him. The way I once did when he was 7 and hid behind my legs on the first day of school. But there was no hiding now, only bright lights. A Bible oath, and Dana's hand pressing his shoulder as he walked past. He sat tall, jaw clenched, his eyes carefully fixed on the judge. Never once on me. Dana's lawyer wasted no time. Mr. Carter, in your experience, who was most present for your father during his later years? Marcus's throat worked. Dana Caldwell. The words echoed like gunfire in my chest. And would you say, the lawyer pressed, that your mother, Mrs. Carter, was often critical of your father? Marcus hesitated. I could see the war in his eyes, memories tugging against rehearsed lines. At last, he said, yes, she criticized him a lot. Dana's lawyer smiled, like a hunter landing the shot. Then Michelle rose, calm but fierce. Mr. Carter, she began softly, you've testified that your mother was critical. Do you remember her staying up with you during asthma attacks? His lips parted, uncertain. Yes. Do you remember her selling her mother's emerald ring to pay your tuition when your father's investments failed? Marcus shifted in his seat. Yes. Michelle nodded gently. So would you agree that sometimes what feels like criticism is actually care? That sacrifice is another form of love? Silence. His eyes flicked toward me. Just for a heartbeat. Then he looked down. The judge leaned forward. You may step down, Mr. Carter. He walked past without looking at me. But the tremor in his hands told me the cracks were forming. Dana still had her claws in him, but cracks can spread fast. And the next piece of evidence would shake the courtroom like an earthquake. The courtroom was hushed, like the walls themselves were waiting to hear which truth would finally break free. Michelle rose slowly, carrying a thick folder that seemed to weigh more than paper should. I knew what was inside. I'd seen Ruth's trembling hands when she discovered it. Your Honor, Michelle began, voice ringing steady, we have uncovered direct proof that Mr. Whitaker funneled company money to Ms. Caldwell for personal gain. Dana stiffened. Her lawyer shuffled papers frantically, sensing the blow before it landed. Michelle opened the folder and projected the documents on the courtroom screen. Grainy emails scrolled into view. Subject, Cape May Cottage. Tom, please confirm transfer before closing. I'll stock your favorite scotch for the first night. Dana Caldwell. Attached was a ledger line showing a $75 transfer from Whitaker and Associates to Quinty Consulting LLC. Dated just 2 weeks before the deed on Dana's cottage. The gallery gasped. Even the court reporter paused typing for a heartbeat. Michelle pressed on. Not only does this establish a direct financial tie, it shows personal benefit. Ms. Caldwell was not a business partner. She was a beneficiary of misappropriated funds, disguised under false invoices. Dana's lawyer leapt to his feet. Objection. This is circumstantial, Your Honor. The judge cut him off. Overruled. The evidence is clear. Michelle clicked to the next exhibit, a memo in Tom's handwriting. Ensure Dana's expenses remain off books. Use Quinty. Do not include an audit. My chest constricted. Seeing Tom's writing, so familiar and neat, felt like a betrayal reaching out from the grave. For years, those tidy letters had written me birthday cards, grocery lists, even apologies scribbled on post-its. Now they damned him, and her, together. Michelle's voice sharpened. This is fraud, Your Honor. Premeditated, calculated fraud, and Ms. Caldwell was complicit every step of the way. I glanced toward Marcus. He sat frozen, his eyes glued to the screen, lips slightly parted as if air itself had turned against him. He looked at the memo, then at Dana. For the first time, I saw doubt flood his face. Dana reached for his arm under the table, whispering something I couldn't hear. He pulled his elbow just slightly out of her grasp. My breath caught. It was the smallest movement, but to me, it was thunder. The judge leaned back, tapping her pen against the bench. This court will recess for deliberation. A ruling will follow shortly. The gavel cracked. The room erupted in whispers. Reporters already scurrying toward the exit to call their editors. I stayed seated, clutching the folder marked Truth in my lap, letting the sound of splintering illusions wash over me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a background character in my own story. I felt like the author. And Dana, her perfect hair trembling slightly, her lawyer's sweat betraying panic, looked less like a queen and more like a woman whose crown was melting. But verdicts aren't just about the guilty, they're about the ones left behind. And when the judge returned, the gavel didn't just fall on Dana, it fell on Marcus. 2. The gavel struck again, echoing like thunder over marble. Everyone rose as the judge re-entered, robes flowing, expression carved in stone. The courtroom quieted until even the shuffling of papers seemed like blasphemy. She adjusted her glasses and began. This court has reviewed the testimony, the documents presented, and the financial evidence tied to Quinty Consulting. The conclusion is clear. Misappropriation occurred. Ms. Dana Caldwell knowingly accepted funds diverted from Whitaker and Associates for her personal gain. Accordingly, this court orders full restitution of $1.1 million, inclusive of interest. All properties purchased with those funds are to be liquidated, and proceeds returned to the estate. Dana's lawyer slumped into his chair. Dana herself sat motionless, face pale beneath layers of foundation, as if the verdict had stripped away the armor she'd spent years polishing. The judge continued, her gaze sweeping the room. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, your petition for rightful inheritance is upheld. You are recognized as the legal spouse and heir of Thomas Whitaker. My knees nearly buckled. Michelle placed a firm hand on my arm, steadying me. My 40 years had not been erased after all. The gallery erupted, reporters scribbling furiously, whispers crackling like wildfire. Dana's lips parted, but no words came. She simply stared at me, venom and disbelief swirling behind her eyes. But it wasn't Dana I was watching. It was Marcus. He sat at the back, hands pressed together, face blank in the way only someone drowning can look. When the judge adjourned, he didn't move. He didn't follow Dana. He didn't look at me either. He just stayed there, like a man whose foundation had crumbled beneath his feet. I walked past him slowly, pausing just close enough for him to hear me whisper, I never stopped being your mother. He didn't respond, but his shoulders shook once, almost imperceptibly. Outside, cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward me, but all I saw was Marcus's silhouette through the glass doors. Still seated, still stunned, still mine, whether he knew it yet or not. Justice had been served, but justice doesn't heal. And as I left the courthouse, I knew the real verdict, the one that mattered most, still waited in my son's heart. The days after the verdict passed in a blur of paperwork, reporters, and congratulations that tasted hollow. Yes, Dana had been stripped of her stolen crown. Yes, the court had named me rightful heir. But victories can be strangely quiet things when celebrated alone. The house echoed more than ever. Tom's recliner still sat in its corner, daring me to throw it out. I didn't, not yet. Instead, I watered the plants, sorted mail, and tried not to listen to the silence pressing against the windows. Then, on the third evening, the phone rang. The caller ID made my chest tighten. Marcus. I answered cautiously. Hello? His voice was softer than it had been in months. Mom. Just one word, but it nearly undid me. He hesitated before continuing. I don't know what to think anymore. Everything Dad told me, it feels like a lie now. And I defended him. I defended her. His breath hitched. I'm sorry. I sat at the kitchen table, gripping the receiver. Marcus, the truth isn't always clean. It's jagged, but you faced it. That matters. Silence hummed between us, heavy but alive. Can we talk? He asked finally. Not in a courtroom. Just us. The next morning, we met in the garden behind our house, the same garden where I had once taught him how to plant tulips crooked and watch them grow anyway. He stood awkwardly, hands shoved in his pockets. For a moment, neither of us spoke, then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. His voice cracked against my shoulder. I was wrong, Mom. I wanted to believe Dad was perfect. But the only person who never left me was you. Tears finally came, hot and unstoppable, soaking into his coat. I pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. The same brown eyes that once pleaded for bedtime stories. You don't have to carry his lies anymore. I whispered, you just have to carry yourself. And maybe, if you'll let me, I'll walk beside you again. Marcus nodded, his jaw trembling. For the first time in years. He looked like my son, not Dana's protege. Not Tom's shadow, just mine. But even as we stood in that fragile embrace, I knew this story wasn't just about betrayal, it was about survival. And the lesson waiting at the end was one every listener needed to hear. Spring sunlight filtered through the crabapple tree in the yard, scattering pink petals across the grass. Marcus and I sat on the old porch steps, the wood creaking beneath us like it remembered every argument, every lullaby, every silence that had lived in this house. For once, I wasn't angry, I wasn't even sad, I was simply lighter. Dana was gone from our lives. Her empire reduced to foreclosure notices and headlines she couldn't control. Tom's legacy was no longer a fortress built on lies but a cautionary tale written in ink I hadn't chosen. And Marcus, my son, was here. Not perfect, not whole, but here. We didn't speak much. Sometimes the loudest love is the quietest. He handed me a cup of coffee. Just the way I liked it, black. No sugar. I smiled. Maybe he remembered after all. I looked out at the street where life kept marching forward, neighbors walking dogs. Children wobbling on bikes. The mail truck groaning by. The world didn't pause for my pain. But I had finally stopped pausing for it. Too. That night, I put Tom's recliner out on the curb. I stood there barefoot, wind brushing my hair, and whispered a goodbye that tasted more like freedom than grief. For the first time in 4 decades, I wasn't a caretaker, a shadow, or a supporting character. I was Evelyn Carter, woman, survivor, fighter, and the story ahead would be mine alone to write. Sometimes the people we trust most build empires on our silence. They tell us sacrifice is love, obedience is loyalty, strength is a flaw, but silence is not virtue, it is erasure. When truth finally arrives, it doesn't just expose betrayal. It resurrects us. It hands us back the pen to our own story. So if you take one thing from mine, let it be this: don't wait for someone else to define your worth. You are not invisible. Your life, your voice, your strength, those are the inheritance no one can steal.